So for today's topic will be the hidden monk and 20 minutes guided meditation, 10 minutes conclusion publicity, and 10 minutes for Q&A if anyone have any question to ask our teacher, Biomania. First, so let me start by introducing in our temple calendar worldwide, because it is the 53rd anniversary of the ordination day of the Venerable Dhammakaya, who is the Dhammakaya master. Normally on our DMEU program, we deal with more basic topics like stress, depression, insomnia, mindfulness, and that sort of thing. However, since the whole status of quite recently joined our meditation classes, and you might have heard creepy things about teacher from the tabloids, we thought it was better to confront the topic rather than avoid it. So today we have asked the Venerable Nicholas to speak on the topic of Venerable Dhammakaya, the hidden monk. Although it might seem like quite an ambitious or special, but it is said that you can know the habits and the qualities of the teacher who exemplify then and the Venerable Dhammakaya is still at the forefront of the abilities in Dhammakaya meditation technique. In the present day, it's useful for us to know about who he is and why even. So what happened was because Venerable Dhammakaya graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1969. On the 27th of August, he was ordained as a monk at Wat Phak Nam Pasitcharan Temple in Bangkok. And you can see his friend perpetuated for. So for this evening, before to meet our teacher, Nicholas Tanisalo is a Buddhist monk of 25 years standing with 30 years of meditation experience. He is a UK Complementary Medical Association qualified teacher of meditation, affiliated with the Dhammakaya Foundation. He is also qualified as a school teacher and MBTI practitioner as a scholar practitioner. During his time in Associate Fellow at the University of Warwick, he published widely in peer-reviewed in journals on formation of Buddhist identity in teenagers and continues to research the appeal of meditation in the West. He currently lectures in Living Buddhism and Religious Individualization at Clements School of Theology, California, and Willamette University, Oregon. Most recently, he has been made a senior fellow at Bishop Gross Test University in Lincoln in the Department of Religious Education. So for those of you who would like to pay respect to the Venerable Nicholas at this time, let us bow 3 times together. So bow, bow, bow.
So hi there, everyone. It's a sort of special occasion today that aligns with our normal Saturday class for DMEU and for the Thai community and some of our local community as well. Most of our day is actually being spent celebrating the 27th of August because it's the day our main teacher in the Dhammakaya tradition in our present generation, which for those of you who may not realize is actually the 3rd generation of the practice of this meditation technique, the Venerable Dhammakaya ordained on this day 53 years ago. And if you're thinking about generations of this tradition, then by the 1st generation, we normally refer to the Great Abbot of Wat Phak Nam, who you normally see in the black and white photographs, who was active in the Dhammakaya tradition up until about 1959. And by the 2nd generation, we mean the master nun, Kun Yai, who was the lineage holder for the Dhammakaya tradition from about 1959 until the 1970s. And Kunyai's protege was this Venerable Dhammajiyo, who at the time he met her was a student in university. So today we're going to take the opportunity, a timely opportunity, to look at some of his background. And as for the hidden monk part of it, then I will save the juicy bit for last after our meditation today. So the whole mission and motivation of the Venerable Dhammajiyo from an early age was to reach out with Dhammakaya meditation tradition so that people throughout the world could know about the deep wisdom and coming from meditation and find peace within themselves, which is accessible merely by closing our eyes and learning meditation technique. And in fact, meditation is something that anyone can learn and practice regardless of their race or their nationality or their belief. And because he felt sorry for those without the chance to know about this method, then he vowed himself that he would learn it to the best of his ability and teach it to as many people as he could throughout the world. And in our generation, we have seen the enlargement of this meditation technique to be known outside Thailand in many countries around the world as a result of his work in the present generation. So he started out as a schoolboy. In 1944 he was born, and he grew up in a central province of Thailand called Singburi province. His birth name was Chayabun Sutipon, and he really was brought up both by his parents and his grandparents. But even so, he was quite used to being on his own from an early age, and in his adolescence he had many rather deep questions on his mind, rather similar to the nun Kunyai, if you have read about her life story. And some of the questions which he had was, what is the purpose of being born in the first place? And what is the purpose of life? And if I were to find someone to give me the answer to these two questions, where could I find this person? So almost like three wishes which he wished for the answers to. So he continued with his studies, and you can see in this photograph his parents, the father on the left side, the mother on the right side. And you can see from the times, the fashions in those days, gives you some idea of the year we're talking about here. And he graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics from Kasetsart University in Bangkok. But he realized that if he were to pursue his secular interests, then he would, of course, want to reach the highest goals in life. However, if he were to lead a religious life, then he would also want to have the same sort of ambition to reach the utmost spiritual knowledge and to spread that knowledge around the world. But all he needed to do to guide him in the right direction was to meet up with someone who would answer all his questions and also give him the means by which he could reach towards the highest goal in life. And at that time, he was still undecided about whether he would go lead a worldly lifestyle or a religious lifestyle. Eventually, he found out about this nun here. Her name is Kunyai. She is the second generation lineage holder for the Dhammakaya meditation tradition. And she really only became well known in Thailand at all through the coverage of her exploits in something called the Vipassana Bantung San, which was a sort of magazine which they have in Thailand, which writes all about miracles and masters of meditation around the country, a sort of one for real aficionados of meditation and Buddhism. And what this nun had done in the Second World War was she grappled with bombs which would otherwise have exploded in Bangkok and managed to protect the city. So she became very famous for these exploits. And eventually, when the two of them met up, so our Lompo Dhammajiyo and this nun Kunyai, she was waiting for him in Wat Pak Nam. And although she was quite old and not particularly well educated, she took her knowledge of meditation and she started to train up the Venerable Damajiyo, this young man, and his fellow students, learning so they could learn about meditation from an early age. And the place she trained them was a little house in the grounds of Wat Phak Nam Temple, and it was known as Dhammaprasit House. And although it was 2 hours bus ride from where all those students were studying on the other side of Bangkok, Venerable Dhammajiyo, or Chaibun as he was still known then, never missed a day of practice or meditation with his this nun. And even though Chaibun practiced meditation, he made a lot of progress. He had a lot of inspiring attainments in his meditation. And although he had not graduated yet, he asked permission from the nun if he could become a monk, because he realized that this would be his main vocation in life. However, Kunyai insisted that he first get his degree and then ordain, because having that degree in worldly knowledge would help to give him a certain credibility in the eyes of all the audiences to whom he would later spread the Dharma or be a teaching monk later in life. And she put the same condition on all the young people who followed her in learning meditation at that time. And some of the background to that is that she never had the chance at an education, so she didn't want all those other young people to follow her example and also be without an education, because she had many obstacles because of that. So if they wanted to join the monastic community, then they should first get themselves a degree in something to be acceptably educated scholars rather than just seen as a bunch of dropouts. So there came a time when the Dhammaprasit house became too small for all those who were interested to learn meditation with Kunyai, especially on the first. Sorry that the internet is a bit unstable today. I've already changed it once, but it seems to be playing up again. So, screen share. So here we go. Venerable Dhammajiyo started to make a plan for how this a piece of land which had been offered, donated to Kunyai on the northern outskirts of Bangkok. It was rather a barren sort of set of paddy fields, which wasn't even very productive for growing rice, let alone doing anything else with. But Venerable Dhammajiyo started to set about planning for how this could be transformed into a small temple. And a lot, what you can see in the photograph is a lot of the students from this group followed him in supporting the project. And he had to do a lot of meditation to really figure out how to make this inhospitable piece of land into a place that was conducive for meditation practice. But little by little, although the facilities in the temple were rather basic, the numbers assembling there became larger and larger. And this is what they built on the land. It may look quite large, but in fact, it's very basic. The temple was out of town, so they didn't really expect to attract a very large number of people. They were thinking about having a quiet place to meditate. But this is the first Sabha Dhammakaya hall, which was already built when the congregation outgrew the first hall, which accommodates 700 people. And the new hall was actually built with a thatched roof. So it was large enough to accommodate several thousand people who all sat on the ground on meditation mats. And the congregation was swelled by a new generation of Thai people who are not so interested anymore in the sort of superstitious side of traditional temples, many of whom just emphasize on sacred things like amulets, but they're more interested in learning about meditation. So not only did the Venerable Dhammajiyo gather together a lot of lay people, but he also reached out to monks from other temples around Thailand as well. And he tried to encourage the monks to lead a more exemplary life. Here you see even some monks who were previously mixed up with smoking and even drinking in their temples. He encouraged them to pledge quitting intoxicants and to lead a more exemplary life. Sometimes he said, you cannot criticize other monks, but you can try to set an example. And he said, if in our temple we walk, then the others will stand up. And if we stand up, then the others will sit. And if we sit, then the others will lie down. So we always have to set a little bit of a higher or a better example for others to follow if we to hope to upgrade the sort of standard of Buddhism in the country, because otherwise Buddhism would be lost from the sense of popularity in Thailand. Also, he helped out during the tsunami of Boxing Day in 2005. He organized a ceremony in order to bring solace to the survivors who had victims in their families, many of whom were foreign tourists visiting Thailand. And this is a picture of the release of floating lanterns in the south of Thailand at that time. He also did a lot of work for young people under his guidance, and there was an explosion in the interest in learning about virtues, especially from the Buddhist side, by the what's known as the Path of Progress Peace Ethics Contest, which is based on Enlightened Living or Blessings of Life curriculum. And up until about 2006, the numbers of children participating had grown exponentially to the millions in Thailand. And outside of Thailand, he made meditation teaching available to those of all religions and none throughout the world by teaching it in different languages. And this particular picture is of a meditator from the Solomon Islands. So in the old days, missionaries would be very scared of being eaten by this lot, but the monks went there and taught them meditation, and they did very well. And now they enjoy meditation, and they are peaceful and peace-loving. And these days, there are more than 100 branches of the Dhammakaya Foundation located outside Thailand. Venerable Dhammachyo is also keen on using modern technology to bring the message of meditation out into the world. And his pioneering project was with what was known as the DMC channel, Dhammakaya Media Center channel. And later on, this got rebranded as GBN, or the Global Buddhist Network channel. But in its heyday, even every evening, he used to give a teaching broadcast throughout the world by a satellite channel, and he talked about many subjects connected with things like past life experiences of the people who are actually in the audience. So they were sending in questions for him to answer. So it's a very exciting thing for people to learn about. And also in Thailand, I said that there was for a long time quite a downturn in Buddhism in the country. The number of those ordaining as monks in Thailand had been going down steadily for many years. So he tried to boost up the number of monks in Thailand by ordaining hundreds of thousands at a time. In Thailand, there are about 10,000 temples, but if there's no monks in the temples, then it's impossible for those temples to continue. There'd be just abandoned temples or ruins as a result. So he tried to boost up the number of monks by encouraging those to ordain temporarily, and those who liked it would stay on and become abbots, and managed to get those temples up and running again. And this is a crowd of temple pilgrims who number about 1 million people. They are filling the whole square kilometer around the pagoda of our main temple in Thailand. In this case, they are children joining what's known as the V-Star program as a result of the cooperation with the Thai Ministry of Education at the time. And you can imagine how pictures like this would get some politicians worried. Actually, Venerable Dhammachyo's idea was that the world would change if a critical mass of about 1 million people ever sat down to meditate together, because just the sight of this would inspire many more people who aren't so sold on the idea of meditation, but who would follow along with anything that is sort of trending at the time. So if they see lots of people meditating, at that point, they will become interested in meditation. And for all his ambitious projects, actually, he led quite a simple and predictable daily routine. It's pretty full, as you can see, his routine, but he never let it get so full that he didn't spend a lot of the time meditating each day. So he had his 2 meals a day, but meditation 3 times a day in order for him to give him time to prepare himself for that 3-hour lecture he used to give every evening on the DIMC channel. And as a result of quite a heavy schedule like this, it meant that his health suffered. Since he is now in his 80s, but with so many demands on his time, he became quite ill as a result of all the effort he was required to invest in his projects. And since he also suffers from diabetes, he sometimes felt faint on air, and he also suffered from deep vein thrombosis in his legs. And the reason why he wears dark glasses is that his eyes are very sensitive to light. So he was always struggling with his health, even at the time when he was available and appeared in public. As for the hidden part of the Venerable DiMaggio, and so we've seen all the stuff that's not hidden so far, and most of this sort of comes up short about the year 2014, you will notice. So I will save the exciting bit for last. Online, of course, we have this particular spot every Saturday evening or afternoon for those of you joining us from the Americas. And that continues to go on with or without the pandemic, it seems, and seems to have become a worldwide phenomenon now more than for Europe. And also on this same Zoom channel, we have full moon meditation on the Saturday, the 10th of September, which also coincides with this DMEU program. So it'll be Venerable Pisit next week, and I'll be back for the full moon meditation of Saturday, the 10th of September. It's Harvest Moon Day, and it's also the Founder's Day for our meditation technique. So we'll be talking about the first generation of the Dhammakaya meditation founder on that day as well. For those nearby Woking, be pleased to know that we will recommence in person again on Thursday, the 1st of September, and we'll continue with our Tuesday and Thursday classes as usual. And for those of you who aren't able to attend in person, then it's generally put on Facebook and YouTube of the London Temple as well. And the retreat, which Natalie was talking about for the weekend, will be held at the Woking Centre, the London Meditation Centre, between 16th and 18th of September. And you can see details of that on the meditationsurrey.com. But the price, which is a price which is really at cost prices, is just £75 for the whole weekend. So it's probably cheaper to come on a meditation retreat than it is to heat your own home, I would have thought. So before we come to questions and answers, I better answer my own question about the hidden monk. Yes, all the wonderful success and worldwide outreach which the Venerable DiMaggio managed through his meditation teaching and establishing branches was going swimmingly until about 2014. Generally in Thailand, whenever the government is sort of democratic or likes free enterprise, then our temple does very well, because we like to reach out to people and encourage people to meditate. But at other times, the Thailand politics swing back towards something slightly less open-handed, and this happened more with the sort of takeover again by the military junta in Thailand, and generally soldiers are great at about one thing, which is walking around with guns and threatening people, which is fine if you happen to be having a war, but it's not so great if you are looking after peaceful citizens. And unfortunately, the thing which soldiers are not very good at is coming up with an economic plan. And the plan in Thailand was to threaten people who look like they were rich and extort money from them. And the same goes to any organizations that look like they have lots of money. And the general way of doing that is if you can't get them by threatening them, then you just trump up some sort of court cases. And this same sort of thing happened to our temple, who unfortunately looked like we had lots of money. I'm not quite sure how they worked that one out, but our temple said like, no. And the next thing that happened was that they said that they were going to change the abbot of the temple. And the way they're going to do that was to surround the home temple with about 3,000 or 4,000 troops and armed police, and not let anyone in or out until they found the abbot and let him be handed over. So the monks had a little bit of a problem on their hand, being pacifistic sort of people. Some of them had a great idea that maybe we can all join hands and have a sort of sit-in and stop everyone coming in, or maybe we can like shove the policeman and they will go away. And then just when everyone was like trying out all their kung fu, which they had learned back in primary school or whatever, there was a message from the abbot, and he said, just stop whatever you're thinking and do just one thing, which is go and do chanting. So he said we should chant a particular Buddhist teaching called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which is about 17 minutes from end to end. You can chant it, but you just keep, once you finish it, then you chant it again. And you can chant that all day long. Unfortunately, in our temple, most of us have memorized that chanting. You might think he would say, oh, just meditate and they will go away. But he didn't say that, because if you meditate silently, then the policeman just come up to you, one on either side, lift you up by your elbows and kick you out the way. So he said, if you're doing chanting, that will really confuse them. So all the monks you can see in the picture are actually doing the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta chanting and blocking the entrance to the temple. And because most of the soldiers and policemen are also Buddhists, it's like sacrilege to disturb monks when they are chanting. Especially if they're in the middle of chanting, you can't just sort of come and pick them up and drag them away. It looks very bad, especially in front of the press. So they just like backed off. And after chanting in this way for many days, the soldiers eventually packed up and went home. And they did go and search around in the temple to try to find the abbot, but wherever they looked, they could not find him. So either he is very good at hide and seek, or he's very good at making himself invisible. You can believe what you like. But the long or short of it is that since 2017, so that is now getting on for the 5th year, we don't have a visible abbot, but he sends us messages. We tend to have audio tracks of him for each new ceremony, which seem to be fresh and new and up to date, but we no longer have an abbot to look at anymore. And you might say, well, why doesn't he get his lawyers in, or why doesn't he protest, or whatever? But the reason he doesn't do that is that he realized that for as long as he doesn't come out personally, then the temple can continue to do the work which he set for the temple. So in order to save the community, he has to take a back seat and be invisible, literally or figuratively. So that is why our main monk in the present day is an invisible one for the moment. And hopefully that will satisfy your curiosity for today. How come this monk of the 3rd generation is so important and so well known and so influential, and yet he never comes out for us to look at him anymore? And this is the reason why, because of the political situation in Thailand. And we hope that with a change of political situation, things will improve and we can once again lay eyes on the monk who is sending us all these teachings that we hear so often in Thailand. So last but not least today, we have a little opportunity for any questions which anyone would like to contribute at this time. So I'll hand back over to Natalie to host that for us.
Satu Chakalampi. Thank you for the topic of this evening. It's very, I get to know a little bit more as well about what happened to Luang Por. So, if anyone have any questions at all, question times. No. Okay, I do have a few questions to ask, Venerable. Why is the monk sometimes called Venerable Dhammachayo and at other times called Luang Por Dhammachayo? What does Luang Por mean?
Yeah, sometimes what I said didn't match up with the slides. Venerable just means like one who is worthy of venerating, but Luang Por is actually from Thai language, and it means like equivalent of calling a Christian brother father. So it means like Holy Father. And sometimes the younger monks, we call them Luang Pi, means Holy Brother. Slightly more senior would be the Holy Father, Luang Por. And even more senior than that would be the Venerable Grandfather, which would be Luang Pu. But we don't see it, he's quite that old yet. And we usually reserve Luang Pu for the monk of the first generation from Wat Phak Nam. Yes.
Thank you, Chaka. Yes, Glenda, Luang Pu Pisit will send you some a copy of chanting book, if you would like any. If anyone would like it, just let us know.
Yeah, in case you got soldiers surrounding your house, you can try it. Yes.
Yeah, you can do the chant. It's magical, actually. Second question is, do you think the past life experiences from Venerable Dhammachayo's dream, kindergarten were real or made up?
Yeah, I have a personal story about that, which is I was one of the ones who sent in the past life stories for the Venerable Dhammachayo when he was still doing that show, the Dream Kindergarten one. And one of my questions was, slightly a long story maybe, that I had a grandfather and he passed away when I was still training at the temple. And generally what the Thai people do is they asked Kunyai, when she was still alive, can you do something for my relative who just passed away? And you give Kunyai a picture of your relative and she'll give it back and say, oh, it's done. And it seemed like she didn't make any fuss about it. So I asked the abbot, did Kunyai actually do something for my grandfather? Because he wasn't a Buddhist or anything like that. He was just like an old man. He used to be mayor of Dartmouth in Devon, if you ever heard of that place before. And he said, yes, Kunyai went and she helped him out of the first level of hell realm to be in a level of heaven. And I wondered, hey, how did he know it's the first level of heaven? And first level of hell, which is normally connected with people who did quite a lot of killing of some sort or another during their life. And in fact, what I didn't tell the abbot was that my grandfather had been a soldier in the war. So obviously he'd been involved with that sort of thing. He would have had that karma. So because he managed to fill in the gaps like that, I believe that the past life experiences, which he talked about on the Dream Kindergarten program, have a lot of truth behind them. Yeah.
Very intriguing. Thank you, Chakalampi. And how does the Dhammakaya tradition choose its next leader?
Okay, so it's like we've had the great abbot of Wat Phak Nam, and then we have Kunyai, and then we got the present abbot. And some people might say, well, if the abbot can't appear anymore, why don't you just get a new leader or whatever? It doesn't actually happen like that. And in practice at the present time, a lot of the running of the temple is mostly done by a committee in Thailand, because they can actually deal with the work on a day-to-day basis. So at the moment, there's no real sort of leader sort of leading the way, but the committee sort of work on the principles which he gave us. But if you are familiar with the way Tibetan Buddhism works, where the master dies and then is reborn as the student of his present day student to be trained up again, and the two of them are taken in turn to be reborn like that, to keep the lineage going. And for us, it's rather similar like that, eventually the great abbot of Wat Pah Nam must come back again to pick up on the teachings which the Venerable Dhammachayo left behind. So that is sort of in the pipeline. And some people said that the reason which the pagoda was built to be so sturdy and long-lasting, to last 1,000 years, is because within 1,000 years, the great abbot of Wat Pah Nam would come back to be able to use that as a place to gather people again for the fourth generation of the Dhammakaya. So in the Dhammakaya tradition, it's not, oh, this person looks like they got a good profile or resume, or this person looks like they're going to get the job. But it has to be always the best meditator of that generation, because they need to be the person who can pass along the high-level meditation to the next group of meditators. So in some generations, it's a monk, but sometimes, like for Kunyai, it was the nuns who were the better meditators. So Kunyai managed to be the lineage holder at that time, even though she wasn't a monk, and even though she didn't have an education or was even literate. But she was the best meditator at the time. So that is generally how the person who would be the leader of the next generation of Dhammakaya meditators would come to be chosen.
Satujaka. So it's like you cultivating all the merits and everything. And
yes, it's a cumulative thing as well.
Satu. Anyone else? Any questions at all?
You're still digesting that lot.
It is quite sort of superstitious and everything, but you know in the world sometimes word cannot describe beyond our knowledge. That's what I believe anyway, but just to share the point. But yeah, there are so many things out there that we don't know, and it's invisible and visible.
Yeah. Hidden monks and mystery worlds. Yes. Hopefully your Saturday afternoon or evening has not been in vain, and you have lots of new things to think about.
Yeah, we have a book. I believe we have a biography of Luang Por Dhammachayo as well. If Martin would like to have any copies or anything, just ask at the temple. They happily do, give you some copies.
I think it would be a book that hasn't quite got a happy ending yet.
No.
Yeah. I have never seen a book about him, I must say. It's mostly just sort of peters out about 2014 or something, and then sort of goes quiet. Yeah, so we're still waiting for the happy ending chapter, and then we can complete the book, I think.